Hello, everyone, again. My name is Despina Aphrodite Milaki. I am the UN representative for the International Representation Association, and I'll be your moderator today. Together with my fellow co-organizers and co-sponsors, I would like to welcome you. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate your time, your participation. We are really excited to have you here. And I'm deeply grateful to our distinguished speakers for making the time to join us in this panel, and I hope all you enjoy this discussion. Social protection is a major instrumental tool to reduce inequalities, eradicate poverty, and accelerate progress for sustainable development. The Doha Political Declaration, adopted at the Second World Social Summit last November, outlines the measures pledged to support social protection for all and advance social development and social justice. With only 5 years remaining, less than 5 actually, before the 2030 SDG agenda deadline, progress remains uneven, as nearly half of the world's population still lacks any form of social protection coverage. This reality underscores the urgency of moving from rhetoric to action in order to achieve universal social protection, as our event's title indicates. Before we begin our panel discussion, allow me to share with you some housekeeping rules. I'm sure you already are aware. Please keep your microphones muted in order to optimize everyone's experience, everyone's gathered here today. A kind reminder to our speakers, it would be greatly appreciated if you respect the designated time of 5 minutes so that everybody would be given an equal opportunity to present. I would like also to let everyone know that following our speakers' presentations, if time allows it, we will have a Q&A section. And with that being said, and without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Madame Jane Mwayanga, the Director of the National Social Protection Secretariat, to deliver her opening remarks on behalf of the government of Kenya. Madame Mwayanga, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my moderator, for this opportunity, and thank you everybody for coming. Kenya is honored to contribute to this dialogue on advancing social protection as a cornerstone for social justice and sustainable development. The Doha Declaration 2025 recognizes social protection as a backbone of social development and underscores the need of reducing inequality, combating poverty, and accelerating progress. Kenya's progress towards universal social protection is anchored on a strong legal and policy framework that has built inclusive and resilient systems. The Kenya Social Protection Policy adopts a right-based approach, a life cycle approach, and ensures coverage from childhood to old age. The Social Protection Act 2025 also establishes a strong legal foundation for non-contributory programs and creates a social protection fund for sustainable financing. Other laws that also support the social protection sector include the Persons with Disabilities Act and the Social Health Insurance Act. Kenya is implementing a consolidated cash transfer that covers 1.7 million vulnerable households, and it is important to note that this is 100% domestically funded. Kenya's cash transfer, or what we call the national safety net programs, are funded from domestic revenue. Kenya has also established a national drought and emergency fund that advances anticipatory actions for providing predictable financing to address drought impacts before they escalate into full scale. By linking early warning systems with timely funding, NDEF reduces the response cost, strengthens community resilience, and protects vulnerable groups, and especially women, children, and pastoral communities from climatic shocks. Kenya has strengthened her social protection system, and we have reforms such as the universal health coverage. Like Avalia said, we have the social health insurance, which is now covering about 27 million Kenyans. On top of that, we also have Kenya strengthened their social protection systems, and especially the digital delivery systems, where we have an enhanced single registry, which has data for all the poor and vulnerable households. And so far, we have about 4.4 million households. And we've also an MIS system for our cash transfers. And we are also paying through the M-Pesa. I think we all know Kenya is one of the first countries in terms of digital payment mechanisms. Most of our cash transfer is paid through the M-Pesa transactions. We have also realized as a country that cash transfer alone is not enough, and we have come up with the Cash Plus in initiatives. We have the nutrition improvement through cash and health education, which basically targets pregnant and lactating mothers and children under 5 years. We also have the economic inclusion program that basically looks and targets the poor and vulnerable households. And this has been very successful in that it has supported over 15,000 participants with a consumption support of 2,000 shillings and asset transfer of 30,000 to invest in small businesses. It is important to also note that in this program, the EIP, these beneficiaries or participants are linked to mentors and mentor supervisors who are able to track their day-to-day activities in ensuring that they graduate from poverty. And a lot of savings through the Village Savings and Loans Association has generated quite a number of, quite a bit of income. And from the 15,000 that were in this program, they were able to save over 100 million Kenya shillings, which means that this is an initiative, if can be replicated across other parts of Africa, we can be able to reduce our poverty levels and move the Doha Declaration from rhetoric to actual action. Despite the notable progress that Kenya has made, it is important to also note that we have had our own share of challenges that remain constraining to the social protection sector. We only have 0.4% of the GDP that goes to the social protection. And even as we look at the social protection systems today, the mounting pressure on climate change and environmental degradation becomes a key issue that we need to have a honest and candid conversation as to how we deal with it. Our journey demonstrates that robust policy frameworks, integrated registries, domestic financing can operationalize the Doha Declaration and spur commitment. Moving forward, we will continue to expand contributory coverage and strengthen shock responsive and deepen our integration with employment and climate resilience interventions. By aligning with the Doha Declaration of 2025, Kenya reaffirms its commitments to building a resilient, inclusive, and social protection system that leaves no one behind, ensuring that universal social protection becomes a lived reality by 2030. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moyanga, for your keynote speech, for your valuable remarks. You shared so many examples of major reforms supporting millions of Kenyans, and that's very, very useful for all of us to know. Thank you for joining this panel discussion. I just recently learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a constitutional commitment in Kenya to provide social security for all Kenyans who cannot support themselves. So that's also very important to share with the audience and take your example, your country as an example to move forward. So thank you again. Now, I had on my schedule to give the floor to Ms. Veronica Wodsak, a social protection policy specialist from the ILO in Geneva. Unfortunately, due to technical challenges, she won't be able to join us online, but there is a very equally experienced colleague of hers, Mr. Carlos Carpion, from the ILO office here in New York, who can share her remarks. He can speak on her behalf. Thank you, Carlos, for being here, and thank you for this last-minute engagement. You have the floor.
Thank you. Also, on behalf of the USP 2030 and the ILO, A warm welcome to our side event, and thanks a lot for your interest in how we can move forward the social protection agenda as stipulated in the Doha Declaration. My presentation intends to set the scene for this discussion by firstly reminding ourselves that what the Doha Declaration concretely says about social protection, and secondly, looking at where we as a global community stand with regards to these commitments. Finally, I will give a few overarching recommendations on what we think is important in our next steps. There are 25 references to social protection in the Doha Declaration. On the one hand, emphasizing the importance of social protection for issues including preventing and reducing poverty and inequalities, increasing resilience, fostering social inclusion, improving child nutrition, tackling youth unemployment, enabling inclusive growth, ensuring women's economic empowerment, and responding to demographic shifts, in particular, population aging. In light of the strong potential for social protection, the Declaration calls on countries to reinforce investments in strengthening social protection systems in line with international standards, to increase coverage by at least 2 percentage points per year, to make social protection systems more adaptive to facilitate just transitions, to ensure social protection systems are accessible for people with disabilities and cover disability-related extra expenses, and to leverage social protection to recognize, reduce, and redistribute women's disproportionate share of unpaid care. Now, despite the consensus on the strong potential of social protection for social development, in today's world, we can observe that almost half of the population still continues to not be protected against any life cycle or covariate risk. While we can see that progress has been made between 2015 and 2023 regarding coverage of people receiving at least one social protection cash benefit, we still observe enormous coverage gaps within and across countries, and the largest gaps often observed in the most vulnerable and countries and population groups. Coverage is lowest, and we also see almost no progress in low-income countries. Coverage is also lowest for more vulnerable population groups, including children, pregnant women, people with disabilities, and unemployed. For the working age, those in more precarious employment, that is temporary contracts, part-time work, or self-employed, are much less likely to be covered. Obviously, these coverage gaps are reflected also in financing gaps, so we can see the same pattern of social protection expenditures across countries. It is important that countries find sustainable ways for progressively investing more in social protection, including with international support as needed. So the bottom line is that we urgently need to act to expand social protection coverage in line with people's needs, catering to all forms of employment through sustainable financing. Social protection systems should provide comprehensive coverage across the life course for the different life cycle risks and covariate shocks, and at adequate levels. This will require additional investments in social protection systems, but these resources need to be mobilized through progressive taxes. Through the Doha Declaration, countries have committed to a concrete target of a minimum of 2 percentage points of coverage extension per year. It is important to realize this ambition and monitor our progress towards this target. The government of Qatar has financed the development of a related platform to be used for the tracking of this target. The website of the platform is indicated on a slide that we should be presenting later. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for your important contribution, for providing us with this overall framework, conceptual framework on what the Doha Declaration states about social protection, but also on identifying the significant gaps. I will briefly reemphasize what you pointed out about the significance of certain policy orientations and policy actions that are needed to effectively implement the Doha commitments related to social protection. We need to get the basics right, meaning that we not only need national strategies that reinforce national social security systems, but we also need to ensure and establish sustainable and equitable financing for social protection, especially for the poorest countries. As you said, social protection systems, they should be fit and address specific people's needs, specifically people's needs. So thank you again for this last-minute intervention. I know it was very challenging, but I really appreciate your effort and time to be here with us. And your presentation is a wonderful segue to start our conversation on the strategy for implementation of the social protection-related commitments of the Doha Political Declaration and how to monitor related progress. I'm now privileged to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Peter Ombassa, the Assistant Director of Children's Service at the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, National Social Protection Secretariat in Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Ombassa, for joining us here today. It is a great pleasure to have you at this panel discussion focusing on the vision for universal social protection and challenges in achieving it. Governments, by signing onto the Doha Declaration, they are committed to strengthening social protection systems and reinforcing investments in measures, including social protection floors. What are the policies or strategies that, or good practices that Kenya and your Secretariat specifically has developed or is planning to develop to invest in social protection and coordinate community empowerment and promote the rights of vulnerable persons? Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and allow me to base my discussion on what the permanent representative of the ILO said to the UN said on Monday about statistics, which were really struggling. However, allow me to also look at the dashboard of the World Social Protection data so that we can have a discussion on that. On that dashboard, actually, about 83.1% are in the informal sector. The unemployment rate is about 6.2%. The poverty rate in Africa, I'm very concerned about the Global South, is about 29.0%. That is data according to this morning. The expenditure of social protection, excluding healthcare, to GDP is about 5.8%. And it's good to say that the population covered by at least one social protection intervention in Africa is 10.9% against the minimum average of about 15.4%. So our issues are really unique, unlike the other issues that we see. The data that was given could paint a better picture, but the real data in Africa is different. What are these factors that make social protection, especially in Kenya or even in Africa, not attainable at the end of the day? One, I want to mention around 5, but I'll just go very fast. Number 1, poverty, which I've already said earlier on. There's a lot of poor people in Africa, and resources against the people who want to spend the resources is not balanced. Number 2, unemployment. There's a lot of unemployment in Africa. And number 3, the youth unemployed. Unlike in Europe, where we have an aging population, in Africa we have a youthful population that is not working, which requires social protection for the purpose of intervention. Number 4, laws and regulations. We might want to expand social protection to achieve universal social protection, but we have laws and regulations, especially in the Global South, that can be able to address the issues of social protection. And the last one that I want to talk about is technology. In Africa, fortunately or unfortunately, technology is now catching up. Earlier on, it wasn't there. As we are advancing in technology, there are things that maybe could not be available in Europe, but now they're available, hacking and the rest. All these are things that are challenging us, especially in Africa, to attain what we call universal social protection. What have we done so far as Kenya? Despite increasing in social protection in terms of contributory and also non-contributory, we have an increase in people getting health care insurance. We have expanded non-contributory schemes. We have increased even the premiums for those who are contributing. However, we have also things that we've done that are good. For instance, number one, progressive laws, especially in Kenya. Laws that make sure that social protection is reaching the unreached. We have the Social Protection Act of 2025. We have the policy of 2023. We have amendments of the NSSF Act and other laws that are very important for us to be able to attain social protection for all. Secondly, political will. Ideally, you cannot be able to expand social protection if you don't have a political will that can be able to move you from point A to point B. Fortunately, our political environment has allowed us to be able to be articulate and move on social protection to reach the unreached. Number three, innovative programming. We've realized that cash transfer could be good, but over time, it might not change the population. That's why we've come up with innovative programming that can be able to not only give people money, but can graduate people from poverty to sustainability. Our boss has kindly said about economic inclusion and, of course, the niche. I don't want to repeat that. The other part that we need to talk about is progressive budget allocation in government. All our programs in Kenya are 100% tax financed. Therefore, the simple reason is we are able to allocate funds from the government exchequer to be able to meet the cost of social protection. And finally, robust, strategic advocacy and communication that will make sure that every person knows the rights that are available for them to be able to move from vulnerability to sustainability. Allow me to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mombasa. And thank you for sharing these insights. You framed the situation in Africa very well on specific issues that are unique, as you said, and also the barriers that make social protection pretty much unattainable, not only in the wider Africa region, like unemployment, poverty, youth unemployment, laws and regulations, and technology. But I also appreciate the fact that you did present how committed the government of Kenya is in supporting laws and policies. Of course, the political will is essential, as you said, and create opportunities for every Kenyan family to sustainable exit poverty and vulnerability. Thank you again for these valuable points. Allow me now to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Irem Arf, a policy advisor of the International Trade Union Confederation, which represents 191 million workers worldwide. Thank you, Ms. Arf, for joining this discussion. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Now, the Doha Declaration includes strong commitments to the priorities of the trade union movement and recognizes the importance of labor standards for all workers. The ambition of the political declaration provides trade unions with a specific and significant opportunity to keep governments accountable to these promises, referring directly to the role of social partners for its follow-up. Can you provide an outline of what this process entails for the workers, being an integral part for the implementation and monitoring of the Doha commitments related to social protection?
First of all, thank you very much also to the organizers for inviting ITUC to represent workers on this panel. As you mentioned, we collectively with our members in over 170 countries represent 190 million workers in all sectors, including informal and formal sector. And for all our members, social protection is a key component of decent work. The coverage gaps were already mentioned, and this is despite the fact that social protection is an internationally recognized right, but it's also an economic stabilizer. The two moments last year, the Financing for Development conference in Sevilla and the World Social Summit in Doha, really provided two key moments of key achievements for the trade union movement in relation to social protection, as also was mentioned, with confirming the need for strengthened investment in social protection systems. But as I said, these commitments cannot stay on paper. We need concrete reforms to extend social protection coverage, coupled with financing that is necessary to turn them into reality. And we know that this is possible, actually. At domestic level, we see in many countries, actually, social protection coverage can be expanded. This can be afforded. It is a matter of mainly political will and prioritization. As trade unions, we call for progressive taxes. We call for reprioritizing public spending and also a crackdown on illicit financial flows as well as tax evasion. And also, it was mentioned, we see governments can take measures to formalize the informal economy, currently standing at about 60% of world's workforce. And this would not only help ensure those workers have better protections, but also would allow them to contribute to the social protection systems with their contributions. Trade unions work on all these issues at different levels, from advocacy, from monitoring, and also direct implementation actions. For example, from helping thousands of women workers in informal economy to register in the social protection systems that are currently available in India, to all training women workers in Senegal on how to access healthcare and social protection systems that are already in place there. Additionally, we use, of course, the 2030 agenda, the SDG work. Our affiliates in trade unions in more than 50 countries have engaged in developing national development policies aligned with the ambitions of the Doha Declaration as well, and similarly in 17 Pathfinder countries of the UN Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection in Just Transition. We provide shadow reports around SDGs, but also ILO's standard monitoring mechanism is also as crucially important for this work. We also use research and data to show and convince governments that actually social spending is not a cost, it is an investment. And as was also mentioned, beyond these measures that can be taken at domestic level, we know that international solidarity is really crucial in this area. As trade unions, we are calling for at least 7% of all official development aid to be allocated for social protection. This is necessary to match the political commitments with the necessary resources that needed for this. And of course, coordination is crucial. And trade unions participate in key multi-stakeholder partnerships, from ILO's Global Coalition on Social Justice to Global Coalition of Social Protection Floors, UPS 2030, and more recently, of course, the Sevilla Platforms for Action, including the one that is led by ILO, which aims to mobilize domestic and international resources to build universal social protection systems. In conclusion, the ambition of the Doha Declaration offers us a vital chance to enhance the UN Social Development Mandate and ensure that social development translates into social justice, democracy, and rights. Last but not least, the Declaration also provides us an additional stepping stone towards achieving SDGs and accelerating their implementation, as it reaffirmed their relevance for the future to come, and as the largest global democratic movement that brings together workers' power everywhere, we stand ready, and you can count on us to help build a strong follow-up to the Doha Declaration implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arf. Thank you for your insightful intervention and for reaffirming that there is an urgent need to concrete actions if we want to achieve a new reality when it comes to social protection. I know that the Doha Declaration was a decisive win for workers since it includes strong commitments to the priorities of the trade union movement, such as living wages and universal social protection, and embeds the principles of decent work throughout, including young workers. I'm really grateful that you, as Peter, you also raised political will as one of the most important factors that we need to have. I guess this is a common denominator with all our speakers today. But I also would like to reemphasize what you shared about the way that your movement, the workers' movement, works when it comes to the social protection, like advocacy at various levels, monitoring and implementation actions, the shadow reports, as you mentioned as an example. That's all very, very essential. And I'll just keep one sentence. What you mentioned, what you really stressed, that social spending is not a cost, but it is an investment, and that's what we all have to keep in mind when we do create and design policies when it comes to the social protection. It is crucial, the involvement of trade unions and social partners. Their role is very important in monitoring and implementing the Doha commitments. Thank you again for your valuable remarks. I would like now to move to our next speaker, Ms. Stephanie Vinette, the head of stakeholder engagement of the International Organization of Employers, an organization which is an active participant in global debates and has contributed to the design and the design of objectives and strategies that for the improvement of social protection systems. Expanding coverage and improving social protection systems can foster inclusion, productivity, and economic development. But for this to happen, social protection expansion can only be achieved progressively to secure sustainability. Can you share certain opportunities and limitations on increasing investment in social protection, and how partnerships and synergies are essential in this process for achieving greater policy coherence. If you can also share some examples of such partnerships, that will also be very appreciated. So, Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having the IOE around the table. Sorry for my back. We're one of the social partners as well, being at the ILO with ITUC. So very pleased to be here with you. I wanted to share 3 reflections, and I think I'm not going to add anything new because we're very much aligned with everything that has been said. So maybe I'll give another, more of an employer's perspective to what has been already well covered. And I wanted to share 3 reflections, one on the importance of social protection for the employers, on the limitations, the obstacles that we see, and on what we can do to achieve this together in partnerships. So the importance of social protection systems, we see this as key for resilient economies. They can be helpful to mitigate adverse economic impacts and allow for this resiliency among businesses and workers. We have a long-standing position from the global employer side that governments must ensure that workers have access to adequate and sustainable social protection systems. There are many benefits, and our colleague from the ILO has mentioned many benefits, reducing youth unemployment, creating inclusive growth, increased productivity, reducing poverty. And looking back at the pandemic, it was a great example when there was a significant differences in the human and economic consequences between countries with solid social protection systems compared to those with weak or poorly funded schemes back in the time 5 years ago. So the same is evident for those countries with no proper policies to support businesses, and especially as MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So we're really committed as business and private sector to be part of the solution, but we cannot do that without the right policies in place. And I think going back to the political will, there needs to be a political will to put the right policies in place also for the benefits of all. Now, when it comes to the obstacles, the limitations, we do acknowledge that human rights instruments and ILO standards provide essential guidelines for social security, but we also know that their practical implementation can only be achieved if we give it the economic dimension its rightful place. And the first step here is to tackle the root causes of inequality and exclusion, namely informality, and this has also been addressed. 60% of the global workforce is in the informal economy. And there's no bigger obstacle for financing social protection system than informality. The reduction in tax revenue due to informality considerably reduces government's fiscal room for maneuver and hampers the funding of public services that are vital for commercial activities. Now, how do we get there to a system that works for all? For us, there are 3 elements to be considered when designing and implementing social protection policies. 1, they need to be sustainable. 2, they need to address informality. And 3, they need to promote efficient transition. When it comes to sustainability, governments should explore all funding options, contributory and non-contributory, mandatory and voluntary, including private schemes, and adopt an appropriate mix of policies. The fiscal sustainability must be in place, and there's obviously not what size fits all that would serve all contexts. When it comes to the informality, the social protection system need to go together with active policies to address the significant number of workers who are not covered, and this is key to enhance domestic public resource mobilization. And here technology can help, and our colleagues from Kenya have also raised this point about how technology is also helping the digitalization that you are using. And of course, you all know that we're going to the ILC this year with a standard setting on the platform economy. And this is a great example of how the use of technology is allowing us to have records of transactions that would otherwise go unregistered. So technology is a game changer here in making it easier for governments to formalize economic activities. And the third really key component is the efficient transitions. social protection is first and foremost a means of providing safety nets, but it should also aim at facilitating effective transitions from one job to the other, as it's also about promoting an appreciate business environment to foster successful enterprise and competitive economies, with policies to foster productivity, employability, job creation, which will allow the expansion of resources allocated to social protection. And for us, it's evident that there is nothing more unsustainable than a society without jobs. So we should not focus only on reducing inequalities, but on promoting skills development and anticipation. So we really have to have a bigger approach to this to get the whole system right. So we're really also looking at other components than just looking at what we're trying to achieve. So collaboration is key, and our employers' federations are working, at national level with governments to strengthen contributory social security systems that are inclusive, financially sustainable, and adapted to the realities on the ground, because again, these are conversations that need to happen with social partners at national level to make sure that they are fit for purpose. Thank you again.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for bringing this perspective to our discussion, especially coming from the International Organization of Employers, which is the largest private sector network in the world, representing 50 million businesses. Thank you for your points. Just like the previous speakers, you raised also the issue of political will and how important this is if we want to put the right policies in place. But also the role, the game changer nature of technology when it comes to the governments. As you said, collaboration is key, and in order to achieve universal coverage, we need the robust partnerships and synergies to overcome budgetary constraints and align social, economic, and environmental goals. I think that creating partnerships is not optional, it is essential. And progress can happen only if all stakeholders sit together and agree on policy coherence. As you said, coordination between employers and workers is also essential in order to achieve a greater policy coherence. Allow me now to move to our next speaker of the day, Ms. Sylvia Bills-Gilber, representing the Global Coalition for Social Protection Floors and the Global Call to Action Against Poverty. It is my pleasure, Sylvia, to have you here with us today. And I would like to bring up a specific topic and want to hear your perspective based on your experience. Millions of women and girls have no or limited access to social protection, which is often seen as a cost rather than an investment, as a privilege rather than a human right. How does the Doha Declaration help us shift this narrative and design, implement, and monitor age, disability, and gender-responsive schemes that support women and girls in all stages of life, demonstrating that the right of all to social protection is fundamental to social inclusion?
Thank you so much, Despina, moderator. It's a great pleasure to be here. For us in the Global Coalition to Action Against Poverty, GCAP, and the Global Coalition for Social Protection Floors, this is a really important discussion. We welcome the focus of this Commission on coordinated and inclusive policies to advance pathways to poverty eradication and equality. And, you know, in sort of following what our esteemed colleagues from Kenya have said, this is a really important point, joined up thinking. We're happy that the Doha Political Declaration does express such a strong political consensus on social protection. 25 mentions, commitment to financing for development for forward work on the 2% minimum target, and so on, and that it is foundational for equitable and sustainable social development, as well as being the right of everyone. The Declaration also says that universal rights-based social protection is not only necessary but affordable. And it's great to hear the words of Kenya that you are financing it through domestic revenue. It's a no-brainer, isn't it, that this is one of the most powerful tools we have to make our societies more equitable and reduce poverty. Many member states have said so this week. I've been listening carefully. And social protection goes hand in hand with investing in care, also very important, thinking of the millions of women and girls bound hand and foot in a care economy which is not recognizing them and not remunerating them, and therefore impinging on economic growth and impinging on solidarity between countries and people. So we do have a dilemma, a real dilemma, that billions of people, with the burden falling heaviest, I think, on women and girls, who are unprotected, excluded and left behind. And as we've heard, budgets are not in place to deliver on the commitments, even with countries like Kenya with political will. I want to just remind you what the social protection floor is. The social protection floor provides for income for older people, for children, for mothers, for the unemployed, and it provides for health for all at a basic level. This is foundational for SDG 1. It is in SDG 1 and it is only halfway there. So somehow things aren't working. So how can the narrative and practice be shifted so we don't always have to argue that it's a cost rather than an investment? You've all said it's an investment rather than a cost. A handout as opposed to a hand up. How can governments implement these promises? So we've had examples here and during the Commission, and we have the persistent work of champion governments that work with the ILO in the USP 2030 and in the regional commissions. It's really encouraging to hear all this, that human rights, dignity, equality for all across the life course. Therefore, we have a few ideas. Our networks. In the first place, it's really important, as you have emphasized, Kenya, that governments develop national implementation and financing plans for universal social protection floors. This is the basic, the floor from which all else can come. Many have done so, many have not, and we propose that they should do so by the end of 2028. And they should include time-bound targets, which we can all follow and support. They're grounded in existing schemes, human rights, and so on. We have to address and dismantle the barriers, which are gender, disability, age, migration status, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, locality-based. They can't be universal if they are not inclusive. So let's not kid ourselves. To truly leave no one behind, they must be accessible. They must be responsive to all people. Second, we think that all stakeholders, civil society like ourselves, we should engage in a clear and joint focus on accountability. We have to monitor the implementation of the Doha commitments. How are we going to do this? It's real and focused work to look at the evidence together and the data and the gaps, and to have bottom-up conversations about these. And we need all our partner organizations to contribute expertise, effort, and data. That's why it's so great we have these linkages here today. And also, we mustn't be shy about holding our governments and policymakers accountable and calling them out for what they're not doing. We also think, thirdly, we have to call into question what we believe is an excuse in many countries that domestic resources are insufficient to achieve universal social protection. It's about political choices and global rules. Domestic taxation, ending illicit tax flows, climate reparations, and payment of taxes is part of this financing. The ongoing UN tax negotiations going on here are a major opportunity. Today, governments lose an estimated US dollars 312 billion annually in corporate tax revenues due to profit shifting by multinational enterprises. Twice the outstanding loans of the IMF. They're resources that could finance social protection and essential public services. I'm going on a bit, I ought to hurry up. But I want to say that fourth, Doha and this Commission calls for regular follow-up and review of the commitments. So let's do it. Let's look together to see how this review system, national, regional and global, can encourage member states and partner to demonstrate concrete progress, such as Kenya's, and identify the gaps and outline corrective actions. And we also want to have many more of these meaningful and inclusive consultations with civil society, trade unions, community-based organizations, groups of self-advocates, organizations of persons with disabilities, older persons, women and children and youth. We have to get them inside the tent to see what's happening with them and really look at discrimination. And there's a political warning we can't ignore. The UN Special Rapporteur, Olivier de Schutter, has said that sustained welfare retrenchment and cuts erodes trust, deepens insecurity, fuels divisive policies, including the rise of far-right populism. We haven't a moment to waste. We're at a very dangerous point in our world order. So, for us, universal and inclusive floors, social protection floors, they're not optional. They're indispensable. And we want to work with you all on this. And I just want to finish by saying, of course, Peter said so, laws matter. Political will matters. So let's together combine efforts to develop these plans and come and report back next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I really appreciate your valuable contribution to this discussion. You did raise many issues. As you said, social protection is a no-brainer if we want to actually eradicate poverty and create a sustainable future for all. Allow me to follow up on what you shared and say that when the design and implementation of social protection policies fail to take gender, age, and disability into account, then they miss the opportunity to catalyze transformative change. You were right when you raising the issue of dismantling the barriers. We need to move beyond the just gender-sensitive to gender transformative initiatives that actively change harmful norms and power imbalances. That's the only way to move forward. And of course, you focused on the important issue of accountability at all levels, coming from all stakeholders, which is really important. In order, to provide long-term solutions, these efforts must be part of a whole package, a broader package. So thank you again. And now it is my honor and great pleasure to introduce His Excellency, Mr. Jorge Aranda, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Portugal. Thank you, Your Excellency, for accepting our invitation and joining our discussion today. As the co-chair of the Advocacy for the NGO Committee for Social Development, I have been working with Portugal, I think it's almost 7 years now, and I know that Portugal stands for robust social protection policies that strengthen social development and promote greater social justice. Portugal this year, you all know that, holds the vice chair position at the Bureau of the 64th session of the UN Commission for Social Development. So it is a great privilege to have you here with us. I'll give you the floor to deliver your closing remarks. But before I do that, I would like to remind everyone, I'm really excited to share that we're going to have a Q&A section. Time is always an issue with many of the events happening at the UN, but I'm really happy to share that we do have time for your questions. So after His Excellency, please start thinking your questions. We will open the floor for questions and have your questions ready to share them with us here in the room. A kind request, please keep your questions short, and if possible, indicate the speaker to whom your question is being addressed. Of course, if you have a general question, then the whole panel will respond to that. So, Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. The honor is mine and the pleasure is mine to be here today and to continue collaborating with you in this very important job that you do, and also contributing as much as possible to this discussion, which we deem as very timely, because the implementation of the Doha Political Declaration is something that really should be a priority for all our member states. You mentioned the role of Portugal, or the progress in Portugal, and we, far from wanting to lie on the path already covered, we continue with this responsibility towards our population to look ahead and to see what still lies ahead of us in terms of challenges, and try to do the best we can, also obviously benefiting from the international cooperation, both with other states and also with other international organizations and NGOs. I would like very briefly to touch upon some of the issues that were mentioned here, and also try to draw some conclusions to where we see this debate. And we, first of all, obviously align with the spirit and the law of the Doha Political Declaration, because its emphasis on the social protection floors is particularly timely, as it was already mentioned here a couple of times, because we are confronted with challenges which are really vast, and they are also interlinked. Inequalities, demographic changes, economic uncertainty, climate change is some of the ones that come to our mind, but others, very important ones, were put forward here by our colleagues from the ILO, from the International Trade Union Confederation, from also from the International Organization of Employees, such as unemployment, especially youth unemployment, poverty, but also informality and tax evasion. So all these are important issues as well, and challenges that we have to tackle. So for us, it's not really a matter of choice, it's a matter of commitment. And we are also pleased to acknowledge all the progress already made and highlighted here today by Kenya. Our colleagues from Kenya were also bringing this note of optimism and progress, and we would like to commend them for not just the progress made, but also for the basis for that progress, starting with the constitution. The Portuguese constitution is also has also very particular commitments on this matter, and our national model is grounded in this universality, solidarity, and dignity across the life cycle. So the life cycle approach that Ms. Jane Moyanga was mentioning, and her colleague also from Kenya, but also the innovation which is behind it, all the reforms, including the technology-based reforms, are for us also a sign of optimism towards the progress that we have to make in this realm. We believe that a comprehensive social security system with universal access to health care and contributory and non-contributory pensions, family and child benefits, unemployment protection, and minimum income schemes is fundamental. So Portugal has sought to ensure that in our population, as far as we can, no one is left behind, especially in times of crisis. COVID was mentioned here by Ms. Stephanie Winnet, and in fact, recent years have demonstrated the critical role that social protection plays in such phases, in such challenges. In response to the COVID-19, Portugal reinforced income support measures, protected employment, and strengthened access to essential services for the most vulnerable. And here in the most vulnerable, at least twice, two speakers mentioned the role of women. I believe Ms. Sylvia Beals, but also Carlos, who just left, I think he left, was also mentioning it, and it's true. Women carry a overproportional burden of social protection for reasons that we know, and we would also like to acknowledge here this today. So to conclude, looking ahead, we see three ways to bring forward the implementation of this very important Doha Political Declaration, and our ideas are just to add to the very good ideas that we gathered here from others and that we will report home. First, by strengthening adequacy and coverage of social protection floors with particular attention to children, young and older persons, and by ensuring that social protection keeps pace with evolving labor markets, including non-standard forms of work. Second, by promoting policy coherence between, on the one hand, social protection, but also employment, education, and health policies, recognizing that social justice requires those integrated approaches that address structural inequalities and allow a meaningful and inclusive participation in society. And thirdly and lastly, by advancing international cooperation and multilateral dialogue. And here by multilateral, we mean multilateral in terms of internationally among member states, but also multi-stakeholder, as it's the case of today's session. We do believe that by shared learning, capacity building, and sustained investment in national systems, especially in developing countries, we can make progress here. Because as others, we believe that it's not a question of costs, it's a question of investment. So, guided by the Doha Political Declaration, Portugal stands ready to continue to contribute to collective efforts to guarantee that societies are more inclusive, but they are also dignified, and there is an opportunity granted for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I really appreciate your remarks, and I really loved what you said about Portugal, that for you it's not a matter of choice, it is a matter of commitment, and that's something that we all need to keep in our minds. You shared some comprehensive social protection systems and policies that you have in place, and how fundamental it is, especially in terms of crisis. And I really would like to reiterate the three ways to implementation that you pointed out: strengthening coverage to social protection, promoting policy coherence, and advancing international or multi-stakeholder cooperation and partnerships. Portugal's leadership and hard work this week for the CISOD 64, but also the years before, have demonstrated your commitment to the values, goals, and ideals of the Copenhagen Declaration and now of the Doha Declaration. I thank you. So at this point, I will open the floor for questions and give the audience, you in the room, the opportunity to share your thoughts. Please, yes, have your mic ready. And okay, I'll take two for now, and then we'll see if we have more time for more. Yes, please.
Thank you. Cynthia Stewin from the International Federation on Aging. And I've heard some really, really good, important points that you've all made today, from the life course approach that started off to the need for more jobs, for not leaving anybody behind, the role tech may play, the disadvantaged role that people with different isms, women, the youth too, all face, people with disabilities, but overcoming ageism against older persons is something I feel in the long tenure of being here. We're 2/3 of the way through the SDGs. That's preamble is leaving no one behind. But we still leave older persons behind. And I really think you all have some of the greatest minds that are presenting here today. And the only thing I can come up with, yes, it takes political will, but it takes more than political will, in my estimation. It takes true leadership ability among all the divisions of the UN to really make this happen. And I would love for you all to take that on and give advice, especially for civil society, of how we can help you make that a reality. Because quite frankly, I'm a little tired of the lip service. And I don't mean you're not genuine, but we've been hearing it. We've been hearing it. And I'll tell you, Kenya, you were one of the leaders with the Sustainable Development Goals, with Alexander Kamau, your ambassador, who just said, we converted him. He said, aging, you've converted me. I understand now what you're talking about. And the other thing he said that was so wise was, I didn't ask you if you liked it. I asked you, can you live with it? And that's, I think, where the rubber can hit the road. So I'd love your responses.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Does anyone from the panel wish to address that comment or question?
Well, can I just say?
Yes, Sylvia, go ahead.
I want to remind you about the content of the social protection law. You talked about the very poor in Kenya, and you are working with older people. But you said that you also said that aging is not so much an issue for Africa as it is for Europe. Well, let's not compare, because if you're an old person in Africa and you're in the issues you face are very similar to the ones in other countries, except you won't have your pension, or you have been working in the informal sector, so you wouldn't have a pension anyway, and you may or may not have access to a minimum income, which is the content of the floor. So with the floor, let's go back to the floor. The floor is income for older people, it is income for children, it is income when you are unemployed, and income for women who have very tiny children, maternity, plus health access. So it's not a lot really, but we could measure it and make it happen. That would make an enormous difference to older people who are poor. Not to say what you're saying, Cynthia, isn't correct. Of course ageism runs through, you know, it's a last hurdle. We don't want to think of getting old, but we're all getting old. So let's make it happen that we have a dignified old age everywhere.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for your points. Unless someone else wants to address, I'll give the floor to your colleague on the right.
Thank you very much.
Very briefly, please. Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a brief question, please.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I have a general question and speak behalf of the World Roma Federation, Roma-led international organization working in a UN and regional process, with strong commitment to social development and inclusion. At the same time, some community, including Roma, are not involved in the regular or long-term way. How can UN process better support structure and long-term participation of historically marginalized community so the social development commitment lead real and lasting impact? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from the panel that wish to address this?
Thank you,
Yes.
Moderator. And
yes,
maybe for Kenya, in response to the question on aging, Kenya is developing, we are developing a policy and also a law that will give a framework into how we deal with the elderly. Much as we have the cash transfer for the older persons, but there are those other parameters that cash may not be able to solve. Like, for example, I know one of the biggest challenge across aging is the issue of solitude or feeling left alone, where you do not have people around you. And I think we need to start asking ourselves, can we create facilities where these old people can come, just be themselves, sing, dance, do whatever it is that they need to do and go back home, to just kind of create that social bond amongst themselves. I think it's something that we need to give some serious thought, because it's apparently everybody is too busy to think about them. Can we create for them a system that enables them to think about themselves and come up with their own activities that can keep them active? Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Irem? Yes, please.
Just to respond to the gentleman's question, maybe not too comprehensively, but to say, again, as Sylvia said, social protection floors, a rapid implementation of those at national level is key to ensure everyone can have basic guarantees. But also in the implementation of the Doha Declaration and all relevant standards, it's really crucial that civil society actors, all different groups, including, of course, social partners, have a place at the table from their deliberations to their implementation to their monitoring at all stages. And that's, I think, really key to ensure right policies are put in place that everybody can access the basic, at least the basic services.
Thank you, Rem. Sylvia?
Sorry, just very quickly, I want to just raise, in response to Cynthia's question, that there is no convention yet for the rights of older people, as opposed to the existence of the rights of persons with disabilities, the rights of persons with indigenous groups, and so on. This is an error, and it's an omission. And I know Kenya is doing well on this, and the African Union and so on, but all governments have to support this, because it hasn't happened yet. And with the Convention of the Rights of Older People, there's a legal framework. You mentioned the importance of legal frameworks. So perhaps this could also be a conclusion of this event, that we need to get behind the Convention of the Rights of Older Persons.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Yasmina.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, time does not allow us to accept any further questions. We do have 4 more minutes, and the reason I'm saying this is before we close our meeting, now that we have heard so diverse perspectives, I will kindly ask our speakers to share just one key message, one final thought. What comes in your mind if somebody asks you, what does it take to turn the Doha Declaration from commitments and aspiration into action? Just one sentence. You don't need to be very explanatory. I will start backwards this time, Your Excellency. Would you like to go first?
Thank you very much. In a word, solidarity, because this encompasses not just the political will that we definitely need, also the leadership that was also mentioned here, but the inclusivity of all of us working together. Member states, organizations, civil society, but also solidarity between generations. And let me just add here to the subject of ageism, that Portugal is one of those countries which is faced with an aging population, so we are nationally very much engaged in that fact, but also internationally. And one of the things that we are internationally engaged is in the International Conference on the Rights of Older Persons. And I had the pleasure of being at the last issue in Vienna of this conference, and one of the topics was precisely on the need for a convention on this subject. So also solidarity between generations of a population.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Sylvia, you're next.
Okay. Well, I have a key message, which is to develop and publish and share national implementation plans by 2028 to achieve universal social protection floors, with time-bound targets, followed by 5-year reviews and monitoring implementation of data in partnership as we have today.
Thank you, Sylvia. Stephanie?
I'd go for sustainability. because universal access to social protection can only be achieved by securing sustainability of the social protection systems. And I think, a bit contrary to what Iram was saying, we would go progressively and not rush into implementing systems, but really looking at the national context and make sure that we have something strong that can then be scaled up and be sustainable.
Thank you, Stephanie. Iram, you're next.
I actually feel like I gave my main remark in terms of inclusion of civil society and social partners in the build-up for a really strong, robust follow-up that reinforces, of course, solidarity. I think as a trade union, if I don't say that, that wouldn't work. And social justice. That would be my last words. Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you so much. In the spirit of leaving no one behind, financing is very important. If it was not for financing, most of us could not be able to expand social protection. Let's endeavor to increase financing as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Madam Mwaganga, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I think for me is let us demystify social protection, let us demystify social development. Because I think the tokenism we get when it comes to financing is because most of the economists, with a lot of due respect to economists, don't seem to understand that social development and social protection has everybody on their back. Even the richest of people require social protection. The poorest of people require social development and social protection. Let us demystify this to be able to make the change that we want to see in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I would like to thank each one of our wonderful speakers for their presence, their support, and their contribution to this important discussion. I appreciate your valuable insights, wisdom, and experience. A big thanks to all of those of you who are here today in the room, but also to those who watched us online. Thank you for your time, and until next time. Thank you.